The first step for the direct shear test is to calibrate the scale by adjusting the legs so that the bubble moves in the center of the circle to ensure accurate and precise readings. Place a piece of paper on the scale and tare the scale. Once tared, gather your sample and measure out the desired weight of the sample. You may use your fingers to take some of the sample off to meet the desired weight. Next, the shear box is assembled. Grab the shear box, that is a square plate, and set it so the opening is to the right. First, the circular metal base plate is placed rigid side up into the hole of the shear box. Then a porous stone is added on top of the base plate. Place the circular plate with screws on top of the shear box and adjust the gap screws so they aren't touching the shear box. Then screw in 2 shear ring screws snugly into the centered ends to hold the plates together. Next, use a funnel to pour the sample into the shear box. Try to pour the sample so that it is evenly distributed. You may shake the shear box or use the loading pad to level the sample, but do not compact it. On top of the sample, place another porous stone. Take your finger and push the top of the porous stone. If the stone moves down when pushed, the sample is not level and you must gather a new sample and start over. If not, place another base plate, rigid side down, and the circular loading pad on top of the plate. Next, turn the direct shear test and control box on and place the shear box into the water table so that the shear box sits flush with the connector piece in the water table. Secure the box by adjusting both silver screws to the left of the water table. These should be tightened till the load value on the control box reads close to 0 pounds. A negative value is acceptable, but only within 0.3 of 0 can it be accepted. Place a small iron ball on top of the loading pad so that it sits in the small recess of the pad. Swing the upper bracket, black horizontal bar, forward so that it connects to the threaded pole. The small recess under the bar should fit on top of the iron ball. Adjust the bracket arm so that it is leveled. To do so, twist the hex nuts on the bottom of the arm simultaneously. To ensure it is leveled, use a leveling device. Secure the arm in place by twisting the curled knob on the top simultaneously as well. The ball under the arm should be frictionless. Make sure to check. Then place a travel bolt in the hole on top of the metal ball. Next, swing the normal travel transducer, or known as the vertical displacement arm, so that it is on top of the travel bolt. Loosen the displacement arm as needed by adjusting the curled knob. The transducer tip should be touching the bolt and only about halfway exposed. To apply a load, turn the switch so that it points to load and set it to high load. Twist the vertical load regulator dial clockwise to increase the load to the desired amount. Tare the control box so that all values read 0 except for pressure. The most important step is to remove the shear pins. If not, the entire experiment will be ruined and so will the pins. So be sure to take out both shear pins. Adjust the strain rate so that it reads 0-100 and flip the direction switch towards the limit to begin the shear test. Record results every minute.
At this point, you should begin recording data for the test. You should record the load, vertical displacement, horizontal displacement, and air pressure every minute for 30 minutes, and this data can be used to create graphs. An example of the graphs is listed here. You see the load versus the horizontal displacement. Each test indicates a different pressure that the test was run at, and this graph can be used to determine peak stress and critical stress for that specific sample. This graph here shows the relationship of the shear stress and normal stress for each test, and this graph can be used to determine the critical friction angle as well as the cohesion of the sample.
Once the desired data is collected, press the red stop button, remove the pressure load, and make sure the new value reads 0 or close to 0 before returning the machine to home. Release the load by turning the vertical load regulator dial counterclockwise. Turn both knobs under the vertical load regulator to read off. You can then increase the strain rate to 1100 and flip the direction switch to the right, towards home. This will allow the shear box to return to its original start position. Once done, remove the upper bracket and vertical displacement from the top of the sample in order to remove the shear box. Disassemble the shear box as necessary, removing any screws that were used to keep the shear box stable and in place. Once the shear box has been removed, you can now dump the used soil into a used soil bag, separate from the unused soil. This is done in order to avoid any cross-contamination of soil that might occur during the testing. Once the apparatus has returned home, turn off the power switches and clean up any remaining test soil that could leave your workplace dirty. Congratulations! You have now completed your first direct shear test.